their anger over high unemployment, bleak economic...
You can see this segment in its entirety on our website at cspan.org. We are leaving it here to go live now to the U.S. Senate. They'll gavel in just a moment to morning business. And that means general speeches until 5 o'clock this afternoon. No votes are expected in the Senate today. On the agenda this week, a vote on a judicial nomination in Oregon. Also, debate and final passage of the nomination of Leon Panetta to be Defense Secretary. Also, work on a bill reauthorizing economic development programs. Live coverage now of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. O God of time and eternity, you made us. Bring our wandering hearts under your control. Infuse within our lawmakers a love for you that will make their obedience willing and glad. Lord, enable them to turn from every thought, word, and deed that violates righteousness. Help them to manifest ethical fitness in their private and public lives, making integrity the hallmark of their characters. Let right living begin with them as they resolve to labor for peace and justice and to be good stewards of your gifts. We pray in your sacred name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., June 20, 2011. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Richard Blumenthal, a senator from the state of Connecticut, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Following any leader remarks, the Senate will be in a period of morning business. Senators will be allowed to speak for up to 10 minutes each. There will be no roll call votes today. The next roll call will be at about noon tomorrow on confirmation of the Simon nomination. Further, following the weekly caucus meetings on Tuesday, senators should expect up to 3 additional roll call votes on confirmation of the Panetta nomination. Cloture on the Economic Development Act. If cloture is not invoked, cloture on the motion to proceed to the Presidential Appointment Efficiency and Streamlining Act. Mr. President, this Congress convened in January with a single mandate from the American people: create jobs. So Democrats have brought to the Senate floor bill after bill aimed at helping American business innovate, grow, and hire. These were good pieces of legislation with proven track records of creating jobs. Take the latest, the Economic Development Administration reauthorization. Since 1965, the EDA has created jobs in economically distressed communities all over America, creating good jobs in places that really need them, like Nevada, California, Florida, and many other places. This should be a goal we can all agree on. In the last 5 years, the Economic Development Administration has created 314,000 jobs, and has done it efficiently, too. For every dollar the federal government invests, private industry invests $7. For 45 years, then, the EDA has worked with businesses and universities at the local level to create jobs from the ground up. Even when Republicans controlled the White House, even when they controlled Congress, even when they controlled both, the EDA was there helping businesses grow. Today, our economy needs these jobs more than ever. Yet Republicans have found new ways to kill a piece of legislation that would put Americans back to work. They've stood here on the Senate floor and talked with straight faces about job creation. And then they turned around and have bogged down good job-creating legislation with amendments that would kill even the most bipartisan bill. Meanwhile, unemployed Americans wait, and they wait. They wait while Republicans filibuster, not with words, but with amendments. A bill that has created 314,000 jobs in the last 5 years, they've filibustered it. One would think there must be important amendments. If Republicans are willing to make Americans whole, standing in employment lines, wait longer and longer. But you be the judge. Our Republican friends are holding up proven job creators to exempt a sand dune lizard from the Endangered Species Act. And lest the lizard be singled out, there's an amendment to exempt the lesser prairie chicken, too. This sends the message that such frivolous amendments, more than 90 of them, are more important than putting people back to work. Here's some of the amendments they filed. EPA water quality standards, light bulbs, right-to-work laws, the estate tax, repeal of Wall Street reform, the United States-Mexico border fence. And yet, again, a handful of their amendments would delay or repeal health care reform. None of them, Mr. President, are germane to the legislation before us. My staff looked through all these, and I found one that arguably is germane, and that one is one amendment offered by Jim Inhofe that the chairman of the committee, Barbara Boxer, agrees to. Again, they have amendments that would delay or repeal health care reform. It's a battle Republicans seem determined to fight over and over and over again, no matter how many times they lose. We've already voted on bank card swipe fees and ethanol subsidies, and we voted on the regulatory reform amendment offered once again by the senior senator from from Maine, I'm sorry. Yet we could not reach agreement to consider this worthy bill. But this is not the first time Republicans have stopped the important work of job creation in its tracks. The Small Business Innovation Research Bill died here on the Senate floor because of the load of amendments, none of which related to that bill. And the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration Reauthorization and Patent Reform bills, which would have put about 500,000 people to work, languished in the House. It's where it is now, over there someplace. And still, unemployed Americans wait. On this bill that we're going to vote cloture on tomorrow, or try to, the amendments there, Mr. President, are really hard to really comprehend. Consumer Financial Protection Agency, to do away with that. Repeal Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform. Commission to improve oversight and eliminate wasteful spending. Debt instrument transparency. Amend NLRA with respect to states that have right-to-work laws. National right to work. Gainful employment regulation. Termination of global climate change. Permanently repeal the estate tax. Substitute Economic Development Administration. Prohibit award and designation of funds to any area or entity named for a living member of Congress. Repeal imposition of withholding on certain payments made to vendors by government entities. Extension of certain outer continental shelf leases. Removal of insurance moratorium for industrial banks. Limit antitrust exemption. Repeal Davis-Bacon wage requirements. Prohibit printing of the congressional record. Increase statutory limit on the public debt. Enable states to opt out of health care reform, another one. Stability, oversight, and council authority. Inclusion of application to independent regulatory agencies. Amend unfunded mandates Reform Act. Border fence completion. Major rules of excessive branch shall have no force unless joint resolution of approval is enacted into law. Delay implementation of health care reform until final resolution in pending lawsuits. Securities law amendments. Rescind $45 billion unobligated discretionary appropriations. Rescission of unobligated discretionary appropriation. reduce amounts authorized to be appropriated, prescribe fires in Flint Hills region, EPA water quality standards, repeal Brightfield's demonstration program, terminate global climate change mitigation and incentive fund. Mr. President, these are amendments that go on page after page, page after page. I've only mentioned a few of them. They've got more than 90 of them they filed. If there were ever an example of such a tremendous waste of the Senate's time and the indication that the Republicans don't care anything about the American people working, I guess their goal is, let's make things as bad as we can. And hopefully the American people won't see through it, and maybe we'll get somebody elected to replace President Obama. What other reason could there be? People are desperate for jobs. The unemployed wait and wait and wait. Well, it would be different if they came here and offered amendments that had some relevance or germaneness to this legislation, but they don't do that. Tomorrow, Republicans will get another chance to help us move forward on a bill that has proven track record, putting people to work. For the amount of $1.2 billion the last 5 years, we've created 314,000 jobs. Why? Because it's good for the private sector. For every dollar we invest, they invest 7. In the meantime, though, I urge my Republican colleagues to consider the cost of these delaying tactics. Mr. President, I think we can announce morning business now.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business until 5 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Note the absence.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I'd like to say a few words to acknowledge the 3 coal miners who are trapped in a coal mine near Middlesboro, Kentucky. They were trapped there this morning as a result of some terrible storms and flooding in the southeastern part of my state. A number of different communities have been affected by the flooding, and a lot of people are working hard to help folks recover from power outages and from mudslides. From what I understand, rescue efforts for the 3 miners are now underway, and the people on the ground are hopeful that they'll be able to rescue all 3 men. But we want them and their families to know that we're all thinking of them as the rescue efforts continue. This is a vitally important industry in the region, and in moments like this, it's appropriate that we acknowledge the danger that people who work in the coal mines subject themselves to every single day. They're a courageous and dedicated group, and we're very grateful for their work. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of reform.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Mr. President, tomorrow the Senate will vote on the confirmation of Michael Simon to serve as U.S. District Court Judge for the District of Oregon. Michael Simon is a good and decent man, and in my home state, where we have a judicial emergency by the standards of Chief Justice Roberts, it is vitally important that Michael Simon be confirmed. And Mr. President, beginning, I want to thank Chairman Leahy, Ranking Minority Member Grassley, Majority Leader Senator Reid, and Minority Leader McConnell for bringing this nomination to the floor today. Senator Merkley and I have been proud to put forward Mr. Simon's name for consideration by the President. We're enthused by his subsequent nomination, and we are now hopeful that he will soon be able to continue his service to the people of Oregon in this new capacity. Michael Simon is both a distinguished lawyer and a legal scholar with a diverse and impressive legal career. And that career includes work as a public servant, as a litigator, a pro tem judge, and as a professor. Michael Simon now is a partner at the firm of Perkins Coie in Portland, and he's worked there since 1986. After graduating summa cum laude from UCLA, Mr. Simon attended Harvard Law School, where he again graduated with honors cum laude. Mr. Simon began his legal career in the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, where he served as trial attorney for 5 years. During his time working in Washington, D.C., Mr. Simon also volunteered for and served as a special U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. And it was through his work at the Antitrust Division that Mr. Simon made one of his most notable contributions. and that was a contribution to strengthening consumer protection law. And as the distinguished President of the Senate knows from his days in Connecticut as Attorney General, how important it is that there be public advocates for consumer rights, because so often this is a field that gets short shrift. People say they're for the rights of consumers, but these cases can be hard and time-consuming to bring, and that's what Michael Simon did, and did so well. Working on behalf of the Department of Justice on the case of United States versus American Airlines, Mr. Simon successfully argued for extending the reach of the Sherman Act to include monopolization and attempted monopolization. And in my view, this extension is one that benefits consumers each and every day across this country. And frankly, to have someone on the bench who has this kind of expertise in fighting monopolies, in protecting the rights of consumers, is a very special qualification that I would simply commend to the Senate as we consider the nomination of Michael Simon. Now, throughout his work, both in the public sector and in private practice, Mr. Simon has been an active member of our community. In fact, I've had many conversations with him in his capacity as the immediate past president of Congregation Beth Israel in my hometown, where he constantly is the leader of the congregation, reaching out to conscript volunteers for a host of projects, particularly those that involve children. So he's engaged in extensive pro bono work, volunteered for many local nonprofit organizations. I would call him an official champion of volunteerism, because when you look at some of the causes he's volunteered for at home, he's been a past board member of the Waverly Children's Home. He's been past president and current board member of the Classroom Law Project. You see that he consistently comes back to recognizing the importance of the well-being and security of children in our community. And that, too, is a special area of expertise and advocacy that he will bring to the bench if confirmed by the Senate, and another area that I would want to commend Mr. Simon to the Senate as we look at his candidacy this week. Now, this seat has been vacant for nearly 2 years. And as the distinguished President of the Senate knows, there is a process by which one actually determines a judicial emergency. It's essentially been defined by the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts, and we clearly have such an emergency in my home state of Oregon. So it is very welcome news for Oregonians that we have this opportunity to have a full bench, to have all justices on deck, and it's my view that Mr. Simon is an outstanding nominee, and I have absolutely no reservations that he will be a superior judge. I strongly urge all my colleagues to join me in supporting an exceptional individual, a person who is fair, a person who is thoughtful, who brings years and years of expertise in a host of very important legal assignments, and I'm especially grateful that he's a resident of my hometown, where he's distinguished himself with extraordinary volunteering for a whole host of causes that are important, especially the future of our children. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor, and I would note the absence of, I see the distinguished chairman of the Finance Committee here, so let me just yield the floor at this time.
President. Senator from Montana.
Mr. President, I suggest the absent quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Mr. President, Christopher Reeves once said that a hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. I today want to call attention to 5 Montana heroes. Every day, folks making a superheroic effort to help their friends and neighbors. I enjoy sharing these stories. I'm proud of these stories because they tell the story of what it is to be a Montanan. With all the flooding that's going on, Mr. President, in my state of Montana and other states of the nation, I just want to mention and have been mentioning the names of many Montanans, many Montana heroes who've been rising above and beyond the call of duty and are following Christopher Reeves' definition of what it means to be a hero. We in Montana, I might say, pride ourselves in helping our fellow neighbors. I know that's true in all states, all across our country. I don't want to say it just in the state of Montana, but I can say that in our state it's really special. We in Montana sometimes say we're really one big small town. You know, it's a big state, but not a lot of people. We kind of tend to know each other and know somebody at the other end of the state. And just that sense of camaraderie and community, which I think is even stronger in my state than perhaps in some others. We have severe flooding. The Jefferson River, which is one of the 3 rivers that form the headwaters of the Missouri River, is over its banks at Three Forks, Montana. The Milk River, Lewis and Clark traveled up the Missouri and then partway up the Milk River. That continues to flood into the town of Glasgow. And the Missouri River itself is flooding at Toston. That's near the headwaters of the Missouri River. And as we know, downstream Missouri flooding has been very significant. Rain is also in the forecast for the rest of the week. We have record snowpack levels in our state. We've got a lot of flooding, and there's going to be more flooding. But Montanans all across our state continue to do all that is necessary and beyond that to help. You can see over on my left, this is the Rocky Boys Indian Reservation. It's underwater for the 2nd time in a year, and that's the problem here. The floods come and they recede, then it rains very hard again, melts the snowpack, record snowpacks, and there's flooding again. This is the Rocky Boys, one of the 7 major Indian reservations of the state of Montana. This is Bruce Sunchild. He's the interim chairman of the Chippewa Cree tribe. A great guy. I've known Bruce for many, many, many years, working around the clock to help this tribe through this emergency. For those who lost homes, he helped find a place to sleep. And for the sick, he found a way to get them to the hospital. He's one of these guys that just doesn't quit. He really cares. He bleeds for his people at Rocky Boys. Dave Dickman. Dave owns a business in Great Falls. It's called Dickman Excavation. And after flooding threatened homes in Great Falls, this happens very often. It's usually the Sun River. Sun River, one of the tributaries into the Missouri River that flows into the Missouri at Great Falls, Montana. Dave donated thousands of sandbags to Montana families working to protect their homes from rising waters. And this is classic. This is typical. When asked by papers about why he did all this, why he's working so hard, he just said, you know, I know that my neighbors would do the same for me if I needed a helping hand. Floyd Fisher, another hero, another Montana hero. I've been mentioning many heroes in Montana, individually, specifically by name, over the last couple of weeks. This is Floyd Fisher. He does it all. He's the Golden Valley Sheriff. He's also the county coroner. Floyd is the county fire chief. He's also the Disaster Emergency Services Director. He works as an EMT responding to ambulance calls. Floyd's a busy guy. Floyd cares. He likes to help people. And after learning of an impending flash flood in Rygate, Montana last week, what did Floyd do? He initiated the county's reverse 911 alert system. He then rushed across town door to door with evacuation orders, and shortly thereafter, 2 feet of water flooded the streets of Rygate. After the floods, Floyd kept at it. He directed traffic away from washed-out roads. He picked up a broom to clean up the Super D's grocery. He provided emergency medical care. Working around the clock, catching hours, 2 of sleep when he could find it. If you want to understand Montana, look no further than Floyd. His efforts sum it up very well. Last week, Missoula County set up a flooding hotline to help people facing rising floodwaters. Before long, the hotline received dozens of calls from volunteers who wanted to help. Missoula's former rural fire chief, Kurt Belt, stepped up to help. This is Kurt. Kurt's got a smile on his face right now, so he didn't have a smile on his face when helping out with a flood. He worked the night away to organize over 60 volunteers daily, made sure the sandbags were placed at key locations around Missoula, worked very, very hard, 14-hour days to minimize damage from flooding in Missoula. You ask any volunteer around Missoula, and they'll tell you that it was Kurt who made all the difference, even down to the finest details like sunscreen, bug spray for volunteers. Runoff is expected to swell again in Missoula. Thanks to Kurt, Missoula is much more ready. In Lewistown, Montana, John Beebe's home was safe and dry, but his neighbors near the river were in danger. So what did John do? For the last 3 weeks, he's been sandbagging homes in Lewistown that are most in danger. No one needed to ask him for help. No one went to John and said, John, can you help out? He just knew what was needed, he knew on his own, and he headed out to provide that help. In north central Montana, there are a lot of cottonwood trees along the Missouri. The cottonwoods need flood. They need floods to regenerate. Floods along the Missouri clear away rich, bare soil for new cottonwoods to take root. Hydrologists with the U.S. Bureau of Land Management in Lewistown said this year's floods could help establish a new generation of cottonwoods. The aging stands have been in danger of disappearing altogether. So like the cottonwood, Montana will return from these floods stronger than ever. And that's because of hundreds of unsung heroes stepping up to help. I'm asking Montanans to share their stories of ordinary folks doing extraordinary things for their friends and neighbors, whether on Facebook or by calling my office. We just want to hear. We want to hear those inspiring stories. In closing, I want to share a humble thank you. Thank you to all Montana's heroes. I don't know what we would do without you. Thank you for your service. You're wonderful. You're aces. We all deeply appreciate all that you're doing. Mr. President, I yield the floor. It's just out to the floor.